Welcome to War Movie Theatre, the place where we believe there's no such thing as a bad war movie, even Force 10 from Navarone. This week we're queuing up on the beach and hoping that the Royal Navy get to us before the Germans do. That's right, we're watching Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. I'm Rob Hutton, and I'm stuck in France, trying to get as many episodes of this podcast back to Blighty as I can, so that we can carry on the fight from our own shores. Along the way, I've come across a man with a suspicious accent, burying a naked corpse in the sand. Sure, he's got a plausible explanation. Hello, Duncan Weldon.
Hello, Rob.
Dunkirk, 2017, not Dunkirk 1958. Sorry, we'll get to Dunkirk 1958, I hope.
did check which one you meant when you said, should we do Dunkirk?
Well, the reason specifically for us doing this one is that my teenager wanted to watch all the Christopher Nolan films. He'd obviously seen the Batman ones, and he sort of wanted to see, as it were, the grown-up ones. So we've been watching our way through them, and we'd actually got to Dunkirk this week, which he'd always refused to watch before because it was a boring war movie.
Yeah, well, you know, if Christopher Nolan will pull in new viewers, they thank you, Christopher Nolan.
Did you see this on release?
I saw this on release, and I was trying to think where. Now, there were, from my memory, about 3 World War II films out in sort of quick succession. So there was the Gary Oldman Darkest Hour. There was another Churchill movie, the one about the build-up to D-Day, and there was this, all at roughly the same time. And I saw one of them while on holiday in a really small cinema in Aldenborough in Suffolk. And I can't remember if it was this one or one of the other two, but I saw all 3 in the cinema over the course of a few weeks, as I recall.
I saw this with my dad for reasons that we'll come to. Actually, Dunkirk is a big deal in my family, and he doesn't go to the cinema much because he's pretty deaf. And we saw it in a slightly empty Odeon in Orpington. I think he probably struggled to follow it, partly because he couldn't hear what dialogue there was.
And also it's a Christopher Nolan film.
And if you're not there, and I like all of these, you know, having watched sort of 6 over the course of a month, literally we turned this one on, and the question in my household is, how is he playing with time this time? So when the words "the mole 1 week" come up, there's I wonder what that means. It's like, oh right, right, fine, so I'm not sure how much my dad actually enjoyed it. I think we should have found a subtitled screening, to be honest. But I really enjoyed it. I did it. I think of those 3, this is definitely the best.
Oh yeah, it's a great watch. It's interesting in a Christopher Nolan kind of way, and yeah, it's beautiful to look at as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, It is interesting to me that after decades where basically Dunkirk is ignored, we get 2 films, because Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, is also the sort of the critical battle, even though it's largely happening off stage. We get 2 films about this sort of great military defeat stroke victory. What's even more amazing to me is that both of them do well in the States. So Darkest Hour does $56 million in the States and $93 million in other countries. So that's not terrible. Dunkirk costs $100 million, makes $500 million worldwide, including doing tremendously well in the US. It's incredibly well reviewed. Yes, makes $190 million in the US and Canada.
Not bad at all.
Really not bad. It becomes the highest grossing war films, not adjusted for inflation, until Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
Well, Christopher Nolan getting the young people interested in war films. There we go. I'm surprised it did so well outside of the UK. And I'm surprised there's such a long gap before we get this sort of late spring, summer, early summer 1940 movies in Britain. So, you know, in many ways, I think the early summer of 1940 is, I mean, it's the foundational national myth of the modern United Kingdom. This is, you know, standing alone, Churchill, Greatest Hour, Battle of Britain, Dunkirk. It's that, you know, the history of World War II as understood generally in Britain is, you know, Battle of France, Dunkirk, Battle of Britain, D-Day, Arnhem, end of war, with something else happening in Asia and an awareness that there's something happening in North Africa in the middle.
That nobody can... I'm really conscious, having done a North Africa book, how much nobody knows what's going on in North Africa.
And submarines in the Atlantic, that as well.
Yeah, but I think it does well in the States, partly because it's a Christopher Nolan film. And I mean, it is astonishing to me that he goes to Warner's and says, we're going to make this film about a British battle that Americans haven't heard of, entirely British and French cast, and and I'm going to be doing some weird stuff with time.
And they were like, don't worry, Christopher, we assumed that bit.
How much would you like? I mean, there's some suggestion that he took less money in salary for it. On the other hand, I think at that point, if you're a studio and you've seen, the pitch for Inception must have sounded pretty weird. The pitch for Interstellar, in a sense, you can understand them saying there's a decent chance this guy will deliver something. So that, American critics love it. Quentin Tarantino is really interesting on it. He thinks it might be the best film of the decade. I heard Quentin Tarantino talking about it in an interview ages ago, and his approach very much is, apparently there's this thing in Britain called Dunkirk, and it's kind of a big deal. He described going to see it in a British cinema, and he said how proud the cinema staff were that he, because obviously recognised him, was going to see, as it were, their film.
Yeah.
In a weird sort of way, they felt like this was one that they owned. I mean, come at this slightly differently, because the retreat to Dunkirk changes my family's story, changes my life. It explains why my father lives where my father lives. Dunkirk has always been in my mind. Briefly, my grandfather was the second son in our farming family, which meant that he was going to go and be a lawyer in London, and he sort of trains and becomes a London solicitor, and his older brother, Robert, after whom I'm named, is going to be the farmer and is off sort of doing an agriculture. I think he's technically a surveyor or something. Basically, he goes to his agricultural college and joins up on the territorials and is called up and is part of the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force. I've got a photograph of him parading in front of the king before they go, and he's killed. Yeah. And for years, all that anyone knew, actually for a long time, my great-grandparents weren't even sure that he'd been killed. And then for years, all that anyone knew was that he'd been killed. And because of that, my grandfather then he
has to come back and take over the farm, sort of thing.
To go and become a farmer, which is particularly upsetting, apparently, for my grandmother, who thought that she'd married a London solicitor,
yes.
discovered that she was now a North Yorkshire farmer. Well, quite clear how she reconciled herself to that. But and yes, so this is absolutely foundational in my own family myth, if you see what I mean. And I grew up sort of walking past the War Memorial outside the church in North Yorkshire where my grandparents lived. It's weird being a 5-year-old and seeing your name among the sort of the glorious dead. And so, yes, so I've always been aware of Dunkirk. But the weird thing was that we didn't really know anything about how he died. And in about 1999, my dad is Googling. We wouldn't have been Googling. It would have been Ulster Eastering or something then. My
Never
name
quite worked it as a verb, Ulster, doesn't it?
Asking Jeeves.
Yeah.
He's Googling my name, and he comes across, not me, but an account of one of the soldiers in my great-uncle's unit who had not been killed and had been captured and had never talked about what had happened to him. He'd spent 5 years in it or so and appeared, and then one day takes his son-in-law to the pub and it all comes out, and his son-in-law, thank goodness, wrote it down and put it online. And this is the first time actually that we sort of find out anything about really sort of what had happened. And they were assigned to defend not even the perimeter, the outer perimeter. So there's a town called Kassel, which is strategically important on the sort of Belgian-French border. They are assigned to hold the Germans back there, and the message that they are to retreat doesn't get through to them. And the sort of the next episode of this is that when my father takes over the farm, he finds a little leather case that his grandparents had left, which contains replies to all of the letters that my great-grandfather had spent the second half of 1940 writing to people, and all of them saying, yes, we've heard from our son Johnny, he's in a POW camp, or he made it back.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what happened to Bob. Yeah. Very sorry. I do hope you hear good news. It's absolutely heartbreaking to think that it's not just in a sense that you suspect that you've lost your son, it's that you spend months trying to find out.
Months trying to work out what's happened, yeah.
And I don't think they get... I've now gone through all of those. I don't think the War Office tell them, certainly until well into 41, So they're all trying to find out what happened to Bob, and they still don't know. And then when I was up last half term, my dad and I were looking for something else, and we find this box and we open it. And inside the box is an account of the final battle, which, very frustrating, the war diaries of his unit say things like, and there was a very brave stand at Castle, and this is not the moment to tell that story.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, where is the moment to tell that story?
Well, you get this, you'll have read lots, you get this when you read war diaries, that, the level of detail depends on how much time the officer filling it in had that evening. And, these sort of moments of the retreat, I imagine they had other things to worry about than...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And crucially, almost no one involved in it, no one directly involved in it makes it back for 5 years. And when they do make it home, they feel that nobody wants to hear their story of defeat. Yeah. So they'll just sort of carry it with them. So sorry to everyone listening to this.
No, it's yeah.
For my family, the sort of Dunkirk...
We're going into deep Hutton lore here.
Yeah, well, it's weird. And actually, the weird thing was I found myself explaining all of this to my son on Sunday evening. That, like, you have to understand why this means a lot to us. And this is, this explains why Grandad is a farmer.
Yeah. Well, once again, say thank you to Christopher Nolan.
The other question is this a war movie?
Yes. No, I mean, okay. Yes, I mean, fundamentally, it is a Christopher Nolan character piece about a handful of characters which is set against the backdrop of a large military operation. So I think it is a war movie, but it is also not a war movie, if that makes sense.
He describes it as a survival movie.
Yes, I can see that. I
think that's why it's a hit in the States, because I think you don't have to know about Uncle Bob, and you don't have to know about all of that stuff.
Yeah.
To care, you just have to think he's on the beach.
Yeah.
He knows that not everyone on the beach is going to get off the beach. Yeah. How is he going to get off the beach? And now he's on the boat, and now the boat's sinking. How is he going to get off the boat? Yeah. And how is he going to get on another boat?
Yeah. I can see that. I can see the argument. This is more towering inferno than Dunkirk 1957 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they talk about. I read a couple of interviews with Christopher Nolan and his wife Emma. He's his producer of all of his films, and they both talk about Jaws. And because they say that one of the interesting things about this film is you never see the Germans.
Yes.
I'm not even sure that they're ever quite called the Germans. They're described as the enemy at the start.
Yes.
You certainly never see them. I mean, apart from this part, you see the planes. Yeah. That's basically, you see the Stukas and you see the Heinkels and you see the Messerschmitts, but you never see people. When Tom Hardy's captured at the end, you just see silhouettes.
Yeah.
And their thing is, in Jaws, you don't see you barely see the shark, know.
Yeah. So they're almost serving as sort of a narrative sense of threat rather than, yes. Yeah.
So here are the films that Christopher Nolan showed the crew sort of to think about when they were making this. All Quiet on the Western Front, a war movie. Yeah. The Wages of Fear, Alien, Speed,
interesting.
Unstoppable. Speed's an interesting one.
It is.
Speed, 1924, Sunrise, 1927, Ryan's Daughter, The Battle of Algiers, Chariots of Fire, I think probably for the races.
Yes.
I assume. And Foreign Correspondent, which is a 1940 Hitchcock film that we will do.
Sure, I've seen this. Yeah.
It's a belter because it's a sort of worst ever journalism film in the sense that he's the journalist who always turns up just before something happens, rather than, as you and I know, sort of turning up an hour after something has happened, trying to work out what it was. So those are largely not war films.
Yes.
I mean, they are sort of... Alien is a Scary Biscuits film. Speed is a relentless, can't stop, so he makes this case, well, it's a survival movie. There is an interesting argument that it's a Brexit movie.
Go on.
But, well...
That's 2017. I'll take that.
2017. I think, crucially, this all comes about... I thought
you were going to make an argument about small boats crossing the channel, but this time the British people are really in favour.
Yes, and Nigel Farage, slightly notoriously, posts a picture of himself outside the cinema saying, every young person should see this film. So there's a kind of appropriation for it. And obviously it's released into 2017,
Yeah.
like Darkest Hour. There's a sort of hang on, what obviously these things are made, must
Yes,
have largely
before-
been filmed before
Yes.
or certainly they're being planned before the referendum. But there's a way in which sort of the referendum then gets layered on top of them.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And yes, indeed, sort of the ease of or difficulty of getting a small boat across the channel. Let's go to the after action report. Quick, Dad, they're on the cable car. I had real difficulty picking a scene I wanted to be called in.
Because it's a Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
I mean, this is fundamentally the problem. If you mess around with timelines, it's really hard to say where can you call someone in. The pacing is excellent from start
Yes.
to finish.
It's really tight. And I one of my bugbears is sort of sprawling films over that go way past 2 hours, and where you just think I could have cut 45 minutes from that with it.
Yeah.
Whereas there is not a spare moment in this. It is one of his shortest films, in fact.
Yeah. No, I think you're called in at the beginning and you're not allowed to leave until it's finished. I mean, it's one of those ones. So there's no.
If you didn't call me at the beginning, you can call me in for the Spitfires. I mean, call me in
Yes,
for the
maybe, yeah,
Spitfires.
we've always got to be
all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll come to questions about exactly what height they are flying at, but they look amazing. They somehow, I think, again, sort of they filmed it. They used IMAX cameras for a lot of it, and they said that just meant that you could get the Spitfires in the sky.